Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
Today, Wednesday, March 10th, is the feast of St. John Ogilvie, priest and martyr. And these are today's headlines. Pope Francis looks back on his apostolic journey to Iraq at today's general audience. The Holy See argues for the promotion of equal respect and advancement of women and men in and by the media. And religious men and women in Haiti express their concerns for the country as the president refuses to step down. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells. Our top story today, Pope Francis reflected on his apostolic journey to Iraq during the weekly general audience, highlighting the penitential sense he felt during his visit, as well as the joy of the Iraqi people at welcoming Christ's message. Father Benedict Mayaki tells us more.
Pope Francis focused his catechesis during Wednesday's general audience on his reflections on his 4-day visit to Iraq from the 5th to the 8th of March. In the past few days, the Lord allowed me to visit Iraq, carrying out the project of St. John Paul II, the Pope said. Never before has a Pope been in the land of Abraham. Providence willed that this should happen now as a sign of hope after years of war and terrorism and during a severe pandemic. Pope Francis said that his soul is filled with gratitude, first to God and to all who made it possible, including the government of Iraq, the patriarchs and bishops of the country, as well as the ministers and the faithful of their respective churches. He also acknowledged other religious authorities, beginning with the Grand Ayatollah al-Sistani, with whom the Pope had an unforgettable meeting in Najaf. Reflecting on his time in Iraq, the Pope said that he strongly felt a penitential sense regarding this pilgrimage.
Ho sentito forte il senso penitenziale di questo pellegrinaggio.
However, at the same time, the Pope noted that he saw all around him the joy of welcoming Christ's message and the hope of being open to an horizon of peace and fraternity. Recalling Iraq's religious and cultural roots, which are thousands of years old, the Holy Father noted that Mesopotamia is the cradle of civilization and Baghdad is a city of primary importance, hosting for centuries the richest library in the world. The Pope lamented, however, that the country has been destroyed by war. War, he explained, is always the monster that transforms itself with the change of epochs and continues to devour humanity.
Sempre la guerra è il mostro che col mutare delle epoche si trasforma e continua a divorare l'umanità.
But the response to war is not another war, the Pope said. The response to weapons is not other weapons. The response is fraternity.
La risposta non è la guerra, ma la risposta è la fraternità.
This, he insisted, is the challenge not only for Iraq, but the whole world. I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.
In other news, the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity, HCHF, hosted its first ever women's virtual forum this week, featuring powerhouse female leaders, experts, and activists. The forum, entitled Hopes and Challenges in a Post-COVID Era, focused on how the coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated and increased the challenges women face around the globe, from vulnerable refugees to working mothers. Francesca Merlo has more.
Opening the virtual forum, Vice President of Costa Rica, Epsi Campbell-Barr, a trained economist, told participants that the COVID-19 pandemic has threatened to set back economic development for women for the first time in 30 years, and that it is essential to make money available to women in order for them to develop their businesses and communities amid the pandemic.
It is essential that we make money available to women in general and women of rural areas, African descent, indigenous women in particular, so they can develop their businesses and community national and international level.
Executive Director of UN Women, Mlambo Nguka, called on measures and policies to be passed specifically to support women, and Al-Kaabi, the UAE Minister of Culture and Youth, offered a concrete example implemented in her country.
I think the most important decision concerning women in the job market, as I mentioned, was allowed mothers with children in grade 6 and below, or those with children of determination, to work remotely from home.
UNFPA Executive Director Natalia Kanem discussed domestic violence.
The respect and value of women must start with the girl child, who must be encouraged to understand that she is the equal of everyone on the planet and that her aspirations are important.
Ambassador Susan Esserman warned that criminal traffickers are using the parallel economic crisis to prey on and exploit those most desperate for income, housing and security.
Sex and labor trafficking thrive on human misery and vulnerability. Isolation is a tactic used by traffickers to control their victims. While lockdowns are vitally necessary for public health, traffickers have taken advantage of the increased isolation, driving trafficking further underground and putting victims at even greater risk.
The forum continued with remarks from the first female Secretary General of Religions for Peace, Professor Azza Karam, and activist Latifa Ibn Ziaten. Professor Karam urged religious and secular institutions to partner to respond to the humanitarian emergency. Higher Committee of Human Fraternity Secretary General Judge Mohammed Abdel Salam closed the forum saying His Holiness Pope Francis, His Eminence the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar and the members of the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity have a firm conviction that without women, true human fraternity can never be translated into action. I'm Francesca Merlo.
The Holy See is convinced that the advancement of sustainable peace and security in the world depends much on the promotion of equal respect and advancement of men and women in and by the media. Monsignor Janusz Rancic, the permanent representative of the Holy See to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSHA, made the observation on Tuesday at a meeting on media freedom and gender equality held in Vienna, Austria. Robin Gomes has that story.
The meeting on media freedom and gender equality took place in Vienna a day after the celebration of the International Women's Day, 8th March. Speaking at the event, Monsignor Janusz Urbancic expressed the Holy See's conviction that the information that media provides serves the common good, as society has the right to information based on truth, freedom, justice and solidarity. Hence, support for media freedom and its positive impact on peace and security, he said, should be based on a common understanding of the role that media plays in serving, promoting and protecting human dignity. By providing correct, objective and balanced information, Monsignor Urbancic said, the media and journalists serve the common good by helping policymakers and the international community to make fact-based and responsible decisions. This is particularly relevant in situations of conflict. Through accurate and unbiased reporting, journalists provide the world with an insight into conflicts that official or government information is often unable to give. This is crucially important when reporting on the human suffering that accompanies every conflict. In this regard, the Vatican diplomat recalled Pope Francis underscoring the sensitiveness of women reporters. In this recounting of life, the Pope said, women are very attentive. Women see better and understand better because they are better at feeling. Monsignor Urbancic thus pledged the Holy See's continued support to OCS's commitment to equality between men and women. This includes the advancement of equal opportunities for women in the media, as well as efforts to protect women, especially female journalists, from violence of any kind. Therefore, promoting equal respect and participation of women and men in and by the media, Monsignor Urbancic said, is a necessary and vital step in order to advance sustainable peace and security. I am Robin Gomes.
In world news, as the crisis in Venezuela deepens, the fate of more than 5 million refugees who have fled the country is precarious, and their long-term future remains uncertain. James Blears has this report.
The U.S. government has just announced that Venezuelans living in the United States are eligible and can apply to receive temporary protected status for 18 months. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas says the living conditions in Venezuela reveal a country in turmoil. It's at times of extraordinary and temporary crisis that the U.S. steps in to support eligible Venezuelans already here while their country seeks to right itself. This is the fulfillment of an election pledge made by President Joe Biden, and it applies to more than 145,000 Venezuelans who've reached U.S. soil. But after September 2022, what happens then? The economic crisis in Venezuela is most unlikely to ameliorate or dissipate itself within that time span. It's taken years to reach this dire situation, and it'll take at least a decade to place things back on an even keel. U.S. sanctions intended to apply pressure on the government of President Nicolas Maduro have constricted and exacerbated economic woes. Yet President Maduro's political status and stability is maintained via the continued loyalty to him of Venezuela's armed forces. The United Nations estimates that 5.4 million Venezuelans have already fled their country, while the Organization of American States estimates if the situation continues spiraling on the same course, this could swell to 7 million refugees by the end of this year. For Vatican Radio, James Bliss reporting.
Finally, men and women religious in Haiti have written a letter to the president to express their concern for the Caribbean nation. President Jovenel Moise has refused to step down, despite what the opposition says was the end of his term. Catholic religious in the country say he is holding on to power illegitimately, as David Watkins reports.
The Haitian Conference of Religious recently wrote an open letter to President Moise. Catholic consecrated men and women of Haiti are urging him to respect the will of the people and step down. The letter came on the 38th anniversary of Pope St. John Paul II's visit in 1983. They picked up the alarm sounded by the country's bishops last month, who said the situation was explosive and unsustainable under Moise. Haiti's opposition claims that his 5-year term expired on February 7th of this year, but Moise has reiterated that it ends in February 2022 since he wasn't sworn in until 2017. Prior to that, a provisional president ruled Haiti for 1 year following chaotic elections marred by allegations of fraud. Moise has insisted he will step down in 2022 and has called for legislative and presidential elections to be held on September 19th, with a runoff scheduled for November. Critics accuse Moise of amassing power in recent months, noting that he has already been ruling by presidential decree ever since he dissolved the majority of parliament in January 2020. The move came after he failed to hold legislative elections in 2019 amid political gridlock. The political crisis comes amid exacerbating poverty and disease, with a future of people growing increasingly uncertain amid the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the World Bank, Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, with a gross domestic product of under $800. 60% of the population lives below the poverty line, inflation is very high, and there is a chronic shortage of food and fuel. According to Haiti's religious men and women, the gloomy picture has worsened. They say no serious decisions have been taken to alleviate the suffering of the people or to protect them from aggression. And they accuse Moise of clinging to power despite the will of the people. Recalling John Paul II's visit in 1983, the religious say Haiti is dying, with the people suffering under a heavy yoke. They lament rampant insecurity and the desperation of people who face violence and criminality on a daily basis. The men and women religious say Haiti is on a descent into hell and blame the situation entirely on President Jovenel Moise. I'm Devin Watkins.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, and to hear this broadcast as a podcast, we invite you to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. You can also get all the latest updates on our Vatican News English section, Facebook page, and Twitter feed. Many thanks to our technicians in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Christopher Wells.